Good morning, everyone. My name is Yami Akande Barch. I'm the President and CEO of Focus St. Louis, and I'd like to welcome you to our Focus Forward series on career management during COVID. To those that are joining us via Zoom, we want to welcome you. We also want to remind you that if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box, as I will be looking through those questions and asking of our panelists. You know, certainly we know that the U.S. has experienced a high level of unemployment with, more than over 36 million U.S. workers filing for employment since we've been going through the COVID. And we know that for some of you, you were impacted, and perhaps for others, you know that this is something that will possibly impact you in the coming weeks. And you just want to make sure that you're well prepared for these new and evolving challenges. And so we heard you, and as a result, we put this panel together to continue to help you in thinking through how you can stabilize yourself, so to speak, during this time. And joining us today is Roni Chambers, VP Coaching Excellence for Impact Group, Frazier, founder and president of CareerCompass, Mark Grieman, founder and CEO of ROI Search Partners, and Michelle King, who is VP Talent Acquisition, Diversity and Inclusion at RGA, which is Reinsurance Group of America. So by way of introduction, so our participants know who's here and a little bit more about your respective companies. If I can just have you tell us in a very brief and succinct manner what it is that you do. So Bernie, we'll go ahead and start with you. Welcome.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Roni Frazier. I'm a speaker, author, and career strategist, and I am the founder of CareerCompass. And I help people who are bored, burnout, and frustrated overcome barriers to career success.
Okay, wow, that's a tagline. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, we'll go to Michelle.
Well, I don't know that I can beat that. So Bernie, it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you. I lead, as Yumi said, I lead global talent acquisition for Reinsurance Group of America. So we are in over 26 countries. We act globally, we hire globally. I lead up diversity and inclusion. How do we as a company really respond and reach both externally to people we're bringing in, making certain that we're represented in the communities that we work, and then how do we actually work with inside our organization? So it's a lot of fun. It keeps me definitely busy.
Right. Okay. Great. Yeah. You said that you're in the insurance business. I'm sure you're perhaps a little bit more busier than you normally are, yes, given the times that we're in.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mark. Welcome.
Hi, Mark Grieman. I am the founder and, as Yami mentioned, CEO of ROI Search Partners. Our name kind of sums up what we do. Executive and professional search, contract and contract to hire, which is an area that we'll talk about a little bit during this phone call from a flexibility standpoint, as well as payrolling and the executive coaching. And I spend a lot of my time also in the community.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. And Roni, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm awfully glad to be here today. I am with Impact Group, and we're a 32-year-old company who helps in career mobility. So we have 3 lines of business. Our relocation business is the core. We have an outplacement line of business, and we have a leadership development line of business. I lead 240 plus coaches across the world to deliver our services.
Okay, well, thank you. So my first question to all of you is, what are you seeing across industries in terms of how are they responding to the pandemic? So Michelle, we'll go with you first.
Sure. So I'll speak to the financial services industry because that's what I know. I think it's different across industries. We're seeing some commonality. We saw a lot of companies quickly move to remote workers for those that were able to, and that's pretty historic. Particularly in the financial services industry, where we're built on being in present, collaborative environments. So how do we make that shift to collaborating, being able to collaborate remotely, but really making that shift for their employees and setting them up so that they can do that. So I think that you've seen a lot of that in industries. I think you're seeing the ups and downs, and people are shifting now to how do we support our employees, not just provide them to be set up to work remotely, but how do we support them in this, right? How do we provide coaching, the mental wellness piece of it? And so I'm seeing a commonality across at least the conversations that I'm having with leaders of what organizations are doing. From a talent acquisition standpoint, totally changed. A lot of organizations started doing virtual recruiting, virtual interviewing and hiring, which they hadn't done before. So it's amazing what happens and the resiliency that comes up when you're faced with a crisis. And it really does show what organizations can do. Unfortunately, the flip side, there are a lot of organizations also, though, that are in the process of downsizing, right? That were hit so hard that they can't continue. So we've partnered with some of those organizations because we are still hiring, and we're fortunate to be in that spot to help those organizations that are laying off so that we can help their people that are impacted.
Thank you for that. And I would say that, what we're seeing from our end and also hearing from our end is a lot of innovation is taking place. This is a time in which organizations and companies experiment. It's almost like you fail forward.
Yes.
No better time than now. Thank you for that. Bernie, what are you seeing across industries?
Yeah, I would echo very much what Michelle said. Certainly there were companies that were doing virtual interviewing or at least starting to scratch the surface on it before all of this happened. But, overnight, it has forced companies, it has forced organizations to do everything virtual. And so people have had to adapt quickly. I think one of the things too is, again, to what Michelle was saying, there are some industries that are thriving right now. Some have tremendous demand. I was watching, I believe it was 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago, and the CEO of Clorox was talking about, please just bear with us. We're beyond capacity in trying to produce certain products. I think a lot of online services and businesses are faring well because that's where they were all along. But then, of course, you have other industries like travel and hospitality, in-person retail, which has been a bit of a mixed bag. Who have seen some good and some tough times. And, there are some companies that are hiring, and again, those who are furloughing and laying off. And so, right now, I think we really are seeing it all over the board.
So I'm going to come back to you because you mentioned that some companies are hiring. You mentioned Clorox as an example, but I'm sure our participants that are listening are probably curious as to what companies locally are hiring and what are the different levels that they're hiring for. So Mark, thoughts about what are some of the changes that you're seeing across various sectors?
Yeah, I guess just to be additive to what's already been mentioned, companies are having to figure out their onboarding process. That looks much different now. The clients that we have that have utilized us for search and have hired people have done so remotely. And one of the keys and one of the emphases that we have with them is, how are you going to onboard them? And not just in the first week, but what does that first 3 to 6 months look like, depending on how things unfold or not? Another area that we're looking at is, and I'm having conversations with people about, is really around their leadership. What leaders are capable of leading much differently than perhaps they have in the past? What tools, what training are organizations providing these leaders? And there's going to be, I think, and it started already because of the reductions. And when reductions come, typically you're segregating oftentimes A and B players. Those A players have to be extremely flexible and be able to lead through influence.
So I'm going to come back to you because you've highlighted something that is very important in terms of, what are the leadership skills that can help leaders that if they don't have, now would be an opportunity for them to get coaching on to help them sort of weather this storm. So Michelle, do you, actually I'll go to Roni. Do you have any other additions to what are some of the things that you're seeing across the board?
Well, I would say that I'm going to take this from the employee perspective. I agree with everything that everyone has said. There are industries that are booming, that are growing, and there are industries that we will see disappear for sure. But from the employee perspective, I've been in this business for 30 plus years in various roles in various companies, and I've never seen the word furlough used so much. And so that holding pattern that's so unknown for an employee to be in, it's just staggering. They don't know what direction to go in, right? It's unknown. And it's, where we would have thought that we would have seen a large number of outplacements coming through the door, the companies are furloughing today and people are in holding patterns.
Oh, wow. So if someone finds themselves in that position, what advice would you give to them? Because, if they're in that holding pattern and they're waiting for, however long, 6 to 8 weeks, is there something else that they should be doing during that period?
Absolutely. We're calling it the pause, and it is the silver lining to pandemic. And so it's the opportunity to assess, reskill, build strong marketing campaigns, get comfortable in this virtual networking world. It is their opportunity to retool. And it's a really important, if you could find a blessing in the pandemic, it's a blessing.
I like how you sort of reframe that they should look at it as a blessing, an opportunity for them to retool, an opportunity for them to think about, online networking. That's something that a lot of people don't think about. I just think of, Facebook, for example. It's the world's largest human Wikipedia, I consider it. So if you're wanting to check in with people, finding out where they are, it's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. Bernie, what are you finding in terms of this pandemic? How can people best prepare themselves?
I think Roni hit the nail on the head in that, it's a great opportunity to, I don't know if retool is it or to add to their toolbox. And so one of the things that I have been challenging people is, during this time, you should learn at least one new thing. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. And, I don't want to say it's time wasted, but how do you maximize it? And, you may not become a full-time student again unless you have the desire and the time, but certainly take advantage of this time to add to your skills, something that will make you even more marketable. If you are furloughed or if you've been laid off, consider, where do you want to go next? What do you want to do? Because that can be a driver of your next moves. Mm-hmm. And, even for those who are furloughed, can you withstand a furlough? If you aren't receiving any compensation financially, can you afford to just kind of hover? Or do you need to get out into the job market and be active? But whatever, you certainly should be learning new skills for sure.
Okay. So a number of you have talked about, Mark, I think you mentioned kind of the onboarding process. It has to be a little bit different because most of it is probably taking place offline. But how about on the, let's look at on the, other side of a person who's either interviewing or a person who is new at a place of employment that is starting virtually. And I've seen some postings where people are saying, today's my first day at work, but I'm virtually logging in. What are some of the things from the interview and also the onboarding that, the people on the other side, not the employers, need to be aware of? And Mark, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't have a really broad lens or even a direct lens into that. There was a piece that I had that I found on onboarding that was really good, and it talked an awful lot about the attention that the new person's leader needs to pay. on a regular basis. And that's not monitoring hours worked, whether it's duration or time frame or output initially. It's making sure, I think, Michelle, you mentioned, do they have what they need to get started? And when you're working, an individual who's working remotely has to be self-motivated. And I've seen from just our small organization, because we have worked virtually for the last 8 years, that we've made hiring mistakes with people who thought that working virtually was something that they would enjoy. And what they found was that they really thrive and perform in a more communal or community setting, which is oftentimes an office space.
Mm-hmm.
And so individuals will need to understand, and part of it's going to be trial and error, how they thrive. And another important piece for organizations, and perhaps the individual can drive this or ask it in the interview process, is there a pre-hire assessment? And how will that, and how might that data, that information inform all of us as to where I will excel and where I may have some gaps given today's environment, and what can the leader or leaders do to further enable my success?
Those are really good, questions to ask even during the interview process as well, because I'm hearing from a lot of extroverts that, working from their den, their basement, their kitchen table or dining room table, it's not working for them because, they sort of get their energy from people interaction. And, it's just being adaptable to the times, but people are struggling with that. Michelle, what are you finding? Same question to Mark.
It's a great question. I'm going to start at the interview side because I think there's things you can do. As all of us have kind of, to your point, Bernie, we've all started doing virtual interviewing, which some companies do really well. I think I'm going to take it from the employee side. If you're an employee looking and you're interviewing for a position, be prepared for that interview just like you would if you were going to show up.
Yeah.
Make sure that, you test your equipment beforehand. I've got coordinators on my team that actually call candidates the day before their interview to make sure their equipment's working, right? Because we want them to have the best experience as well as us. Allowing yourself to be flexible because inevitably something's going to go wrong. You might lose a connection. We might lose the connection, right? Knowing how to succinctly talk about what you do, what your best skill sets are, and how it fits the job. Making certain that you're inquiring to that hiring manager how they're going to support their teams who are virtual. Because if you know that you are someone that needs high touch, high interaction, and you're interviewing with someone that says you're hired, you go, and then we'll talk once a month, that may not work for you. So know yourself and start to ask yourself those questions. What works well? From the hiring manager side, I agree with Mark. What are the things that you can do to identify talent and skill sets? So there's key things that we look for that we looked for before in our employees and that we're bringing on, but even more important that we look at through the assessments that we do, pre-hire assessments, such as independence, right? Do you have the ability to work independently and the drive to schedule yourself? Be structured about what you're doing, how that works for you. Do you have resiliency, right? How do you manage when things get blown up? Because suddenly your equipment or something's not working or your connection's down, or a project changes. And that goes to agility, how you shift, how you're able to move and focus. And so we look for those things. We create questions around that for our leaders with candidates that we're interviewing so that they then can start to dig down into finding the right profile for their group. On the onboarding side, we talk about that it really takes a lot more collaboration. We just started 45 interns yesterday in our organization, and they're all virtual. And as well as we had new hires. We now send our managers a note that says, your first week, you need to have meetings every single day with your new hire. It usually, you see them and you wave, you might touch base with them, for a few minutes and you're off and you're kind of have them introduced to other people. We set a very structured skill set that says you have to have meetings every day. You need to set up meetings with their colleagues. These are the things you need to make sure they're inviting them to. so that you make certain that you have a structured onboarding process. And if you don't, I would say create one for yourself if you're a leader to an organization. If you're a new employee and you're not getting what you need, I would say speak up early. Tell your manager, like, I feel like I have a little time. There's more things I could be doing. Let's talk about where I'm spending my time. Don't just wait for someone to ask you. Speak up early, because that will help you. You don't want to get down the road 3 weeks from now and feel like you haven't integrated. And then for the collaboration, it's how do you create that collaboration both for your introverts and extroverts? A lot of, within our organization, a lot of other companies are doing this. Every group just created their own Zoom Hangouts, right? We have some, we call it, coffee, tea, wine, because depending on where you're at, depends on what you might be drinking.
5 o'clock somewhere.
Right. And we don't talk about work. We actually just talk about life. What's going on? What are they seeing? How are they feeling? Right. And it's just creating that community with their people. So those are some things that you can do to really connect with both your employees and your new hires, to make certain that you're creating that collaboration in that group to be a part of something.
Wow, congratulations to you for, making sure that your interns still had an internship, because I know of many companies that not only did they cancel their internships, those that had extended offers to recent graduates also rescinded those offers. So a number of them are trying to figure out what's next, especially recent college graduates. So is it grad school that they hadn't really thought of at that point in time? So yeah, kudos to RGA for doing that. Bernie, what are you learning on the coaching side?
Well, one of the things, there are a lot of people who are concerned. I've had clients who are still working, but they are keenly aware that that could change any moment. And so they are trying to be more proactive. Some have already been laid off. And, one of the things I didn't mention initially in my introduction, but I'm actually working with Roni some, and that I'm doing some contract coaching with Impact Group. So I not only have my private clients, but I'm also working with participants through Impact. And, there's just the uncertainty, concern for sure. And certainly a person's personal situations drives that level of concern. And one of the things that I have tried to share to help, be an encourager, if you will, to them is, in the last 9 weeks since so much of our country shut down, I've had 6 clients and 4 friends find new jobs.
Oh, wow.
And so I let them know, there are companies hiring, is it at the same rate? Probably not, again, except for those who are, in unique positions that they really have tremendous demand right now. But I've let them know, you still have to be out there. You still have to network, even though it's virtual. You still have to connect. You still have to, retool again or add to your toolbox and put forth the same effort that you would if the economy were where it was, 4 months ago. And letting them know that it is possible, but you have to be persistent and you can't just give up.
That's certainly good news for people that are out on the job market. And, you mentioned that you've worked with friends that you've coached, that you've helped them find new jobs. How and where can people find coaches, especially if it's not part of their, outplacement package that they got? How can they identify coaches that can help them?
Well, you're looking at one right here.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes.
So the obvious, but there are certainly other terrific coaches, not only around St. Louis, but around the country. And, even before this, I've done coaching with clients in other countries. So, it does not take being in person. And, it could be a matter of going to some coaches groups, whether that's on LinkedIn or other sites, going to ICF. Which is the International Coaching Federation, where they can help you get connected with a coach as well. Roni is also a coach too. She does great work. I've known Roni for years and have always admired her and respected her work. And so there are a lot of places. It's just a matter of, like everything else, reaching out. And, nowadays we're one Google away from, 1.8 million pages of information that we need.
Right. And for those of you who have not read Bernie's book, pick it up. you know, you're reading the book and you almost feel like she's actually Bernie's right there talking to you, and you know the book just comes alive. And I said, I don't need to get the audio version. I can feel her energy in this book. And the title of the book is Your Success is in You. Empowering and equipping you to create your best career ever. And the great thing about Bernie is she is very accessible. So, you know, if you need her services, I would say, you know, she's my go-to person that I would recommend that you reach out to. So Bernie, just out of curiosity, how can people contact you?
Oh my goodness. I'm all over social media, like all of us nowadays. LinkedIn, you know, Twitter, Instagram. I have a Facebook fan page. It's CareerCompass, LLC, which is my company name. You can certainly go to my website, CareerCompassLLC.com. And then of course, email is just Bernie@CareerCompassLLC.com as well. And so, you know, they can, you know, reach out any of those ways, as well as my business phone is 314-482-5650.
Okay, your voicemail is perhaps about to be full. So make sure you check those messages. So where can people, well, actually, you know, let me reframe that. For individuals that are looking for jobs, how have your respective companies found them? Is there a go-to place, or, you know, I know this is, you know, kind of the you know, details are probably something that you can share that will help people know where to go to. You talked about networking. What are some of the things that they can do right now? So Roni, we'll start with you. Where are you finding your candidates, and where can candidates possibly go to make sure that they are seen?
So we actually are hiring, and we help participants transition. So we're coaching them on where to find those opportunities. So one of the really important pieces of information right now is that they should be looking for revenue generating positions versus expense positions, right? They should be looking for positions that help companies generate revenue. And so all of those growth related companies, logistics and e-commerce and software companies, we have, I mean, our participants are finding and landing positions every day. It's about a marketing strategy. I tell people all the time, this is not about finding a job. This is not about shooting a bunch of resumes into a black hole. This is about building a strategy and a strong marketing team, because you are the product now. Build out targets.
So I think Roni just, you know, we're having some connection problems, but just to recap some of the things that she said is look for opportunities in growth companies, look for revenue generating positions, because that will probably tell you to a certain extent the sustainability of that position. So I'm going to have Michelle weigh in on this as well.
It's a great question. I think there are the obvious things out there, and many people feel like if they go to a LinkedIn or an Indeed, they're applying in a black hole. For our company, those are two of our top resources, right? We actively go out there. Use LinkedIn. Find out who you know in an organization, connect with them, work with them maybe to refer you if you know them. It's another great resource. Find out who you know in your network that might work at a company, and, you know, maybe get an inside connection to see what it's really like, and who might be able to tell you where to go. If you're in an industry that has groups, user groups or connection or industry groups, research it. Find out what there is and then join those groups. We actively recruit in various groups for our industry, whether that's actuarial hiring, whether that's underwriting, whether that's operations or IT hiring. We do a lot of different groups that we're investing in to try and find those candidates in those specialty groups So look for things like that because it's a smaller network and you might get more recognition within that, or look for jobs. Many of them post jobs, right? We do everything from our legal positions all the way through to, you know, some of our PhDs that we hire. So find those. Those can be avenues where you can go to look for new opportunities as well.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Mark, where do you go? You're in a different business. You're in an executive search business, but you know, what are some of the areas that people can go to make themselves visible?
Yeah, I think and the common theme that we're hearing is your network has never been more important than it is now. Reach out to people who know you and trust you. And that trust piece is so important because if you're going to get a referral to an organization or to another individual with hiring authority, they're not going to risk their reputation on you unless they trust you. Mm-hmm. And so when I meet with people who are networking, and it's irrespective of a search we have, it's purely because of community or whatever, invariably the list comes out. And people on this call probably know what the list is. It's probably 18 to 25 companies with the top executive at each one, and they want a personal introduction to that person. That's not going to happen for most people. And that's because, Jamie, if you and I had just met, I may like you and your credentials may be spectacular, but I don't know you well enough to put my reputation on the line. So when you have those, for individuals, I would say when you have those conversations and those networking conversations, start with the people who trust you the most, and the people who you've known the best. And don't be afraid to reach back 10 or 12 years or 14 years or whatever that time frame is. It'll be a welcome reconnect, irrespective of where it goes.
So
but that networking piece is, you know, we use it all the time. It's so important.
So, you know, from time to time, we've heard or read of executive coaches giving people advice on, why don't you schedule an informational meeting? And, you know, I even find for some individuals, you know, they said, well, I want to schedule an informational meeting, but I don't even know how to start. How do I, you know, tell them that I'd like to learn more about their company when in reality I'd like to work for that company? Are there any advice that you have in terms of scheduling that? And in this virtual arena that we find ourselves, are those even things that people should consider scheduling virtually? Is there a time limit? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, that sort of thing. So Bernie, thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think Mark hit on a couple of things that I was thinking. You know, a lot of times those informational interviews, they come by way of networking. And one of the points that I always make with networking is, you know, everyone wants to get to you, Jamie. Everyone wants to get to Michelle. You know, you've got big titles. And what I tell people is, yes, and you purposefully put layers between you and everyone else because you're busy. And so I would say, you know, you start with people you already know. You know, we all operate and move faster on behalf of people we know, like, and trust. And people that know you already, hopefully like you and trust you, you don't have to work to try to build that relationship to get them to move on your behalf. And so I think that's certainly one of the things to do. You know, I think also one of the things that I share is don't snub the help. And what I mean by that is, you know, everyone always wants to get to, you know, the CEO and God and the angels and you know, everyone else. And I go, don't try there. Why don't you try to get to Michelle's administrative assistant? No one is trying to get to her. So she may welcome, or he may welcome, you know, the introduction. Start there with a connection, because Michelle's assistant will probably control her calendar and her email, and can help you start to cultivate whatever opportunity is there. But if you are fortunate enough to get that informational interview, I always encourage people to be very succinct, because people are busy And if you can formulate your points, your questions, and get those communicated and get responses in 15 minutes, that's probably easier for someone to allow you to have 15 minutes, but also to be respectful of that time. And not, okay, now I got Yami on the phone. I'm going to keep her on here as long as I can because I may not get another opportunity. Right. And I always say what you do is you burn that bridge because now she'll never give you another opportunity. And so be mindful of that time and acknowledge you're trying to be respectful of their time. I said, you never know, the appreciation may come through and you may be granted more time. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, it's being very focused with what it is you are trying to communicate, what it is you're trying to learn, and do it in as succinct a time period as possible.
Mm. Okay. Well, thank you for that advice.
Yes,
please do, Michelle.
I also appreciate when someone's transparent. So if you get an informational interview, but you spend that time selling yourself because really you want a job, then that is probably not going to bode well for you. Mm-hmm. If you are upfront and say, I'm going to learn more about your company because I'm interested in working for your company, and you spend that time really trying to find out about the company, you will go miles further than just coming in and then turning on the sales pitch, right, of why you should work for the company when you set up an informational interview. So be honest, it's okay that you're looking for a job, but it's also okay that you want to learn more about the company. I always say it's a two-way interview. Anytime we talk to anyone, you should be interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing you to make sure it's a right fit. So use that to your advantage.
That's an excellent point there. So Mark, I'm going to go back to you because you started to talk about some leadership skills that are very important in the era that we're in. And I want to kind of tie that to a point that Michelle and Bernie made earlier, that this is an opportunity this time, if you're on furlough or you've been laid off, for you to build up your toolkit. So what are some of those? You identified some of them as, agile, collaborative. What are some other ones out there that people should be working on if they don't have, or should highlight on their resumes?
The ability, so agility is very important now. The ability to influence has never been greater, and Bernie and Roni, I'm sure, can speak volumes about helping leaders become more self-aware. I would recommend for leaders who are furloughed or have been laid off right now, if you can find a way to take a good self-assessment to heighten your self-awareness. Because Michelle, you just hit on it in the two-way interview. It is a two-way interview, and I think, excuse me, now more than ever, people have to understand under what type of leadership do they thrive, and then develop a set of questions during the interview that they're asking the interviewer at the company about not just the culture of the organization, but the culture of the department or the leader. If they thrive with someone who sits on them regularly and holds them accountable regularly, and they're with a leader who is more relaxed in their approach, they're going to struggle. Conversely, if they struggle being very independent and creative, and they've got somebody beating on them every day, they're going to struggle. So I think to understand personally where and how you thrive and under what type of leadership, those questions I think now are more critical than ever, because most likely you're going to begin your job either working remotely or a combination of work and an office.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Mark, in terms of the interview should go both ways. So, for most, candidates, they're going into it as, I want at the end of the day for me to be hired for this company, but it may not be the right fit. And so it's got to be a two-way process whereby they're interviewing the company as well to make sure that at the end of the day, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. thoughts about that, Roni, in terms of some of the key skills that people need to add to their toolkit?
Well, and I apologize, my internet is just absolutely awful today. So I think communication is critical. Flexibility, authenticity, transparency. I mean, those are big words in today's world. It's different today than it was even 3 months ago. And so I just think I can't overstate communication on both sides of the equation. It's critical, and clarity, conciseness, but I'm going to re-say authenticity and transparency. That's who we are today, and that's how we have to honor each other as we interview on both sides.
That's really great advice. So if you're listening out there, that's something that if you don't have in your toolkit, and also to remind you about, taking assessments to have better self-awareness of how you're showing up on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, can help you during that interview moment to sell yourself even further.
Amy,
So, yes.
Can I add a couple of things? I love Roni's list, and I love what Mark said about that. But as Roni was listing those things, I was thinking she's absolutely right. Yes, that one and that one as well. But I thought of two others that I think are also important, and it's courage and integrity. I think are also critical right now as well, with everything that we're facing in our world. I think there are some courageous decisions that are being made and that will continue to have to be made. And it really takes that strong spine to make some of those tough decisions that'll be necessary. But I think people are really desiring to see integrity within their organizations too, whether hopefully it won't be a new thing, but it'll be continued, but to know that their organizations are continuing to uphold the banner of integrity, while we're in this flux time.
Okay, thank you. So someone does have a question. Are there specific assessments that you would suggest that people take a look at? And that's an open question to everyone.
Roni, you're probably best equipped for this one.
Well, I would say self-awareness is a strong, can be equally important and very strong in that emotional intelligence space. So I'm going to reach to my bookcase very quickly. So this has a great assessment in it, and it assesses self-awareness, responsibility. I mean, it's $15 on Amazon. Go get it.
Okay. EQI 2.0, I noticed that, it seems to be a lot of HR things that I'm reading. Emotional intelligence seems to be key. That they're emphasizing. So EQI 2.0 certainly is an assessment that I would highly recommend. So a question to all of you is, what can employers do differently to support greater equity and access? That's an open question to everyone.
I'll start. I will say, I think a lot of companies have made a lot of attempts, if not strides, to provide, equity and inclusion in their organizations. And many have done it for a number of years now. And I think, just in my experience, I'm not in corporate anymore, but I spent, about 25 years in working for different companies in different industries. And, I would see a lot of organizations that would do a start, kind of an awareness piece, but that's where it started and that's where it ended. And I think that it's tough, particularly with what we're dealing with right now. But I think, the courageous conversations are what are really necessary in order to start to further things, so that I think a lot of times people will find that there's a lot more in common different.
Right.
You know, the goals are the same. Maybe the approach to getting there is where the divergence is. But I think companies will have to start to take it beyond maybe an awareness piece and really try to, you know, are there champions that can really start to support organizational dialogue and transformation in order for companies to really tap into the talent of everyone that's there so that they can become even more competitive and innovative for the future.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you. Those are
you.
great comments. I would almost add to that, that when you're starting out, you have to be programmatic, right? You need a program to get things started often. But if it's only a program, it's never going to succeed, right? Until it becomes ingrained in your organization, until you're providing your leaders toolkits to have those hard conversations. Because let's be honest, people avoid things that are hard a lot of times, the majority of us, right? Living in that tension, but until I'm willing to sit down and break bread with you or have a conversation, get to know you, build that trust, it's really hard for you to trust me. And that happens, to Bernie's point, when you get to know people, right? When you actually build into people. I think there are some things organizations need to make certain they're doing, and that's holding people accountable. What gets measured, you know, is held accountable, right? And so there are things that if you're not measuring anything, you should start measuring things. Are you looking at succession planning? Do you make certain that your leadership programs, are they diverse enough, both from a gender or race or different, you know, choices? Make certain that that happens. Make sure your employees know where you stand as an organization, that you have an inclusive environment, and live up to it, because you might say it, but a slogan is not inclusiveness. One of my friends, when we were having, with all the disruption, said proximity is not reconciliation, right? Just because I sit next to you doesn't mean we're reconciled. So, and are you going to have those conversations? And I think as an organization, being open to listen to people's experiences, take that into account, and then look and understand that everyone's different. So how do you build something around something? And as individuals, how do we be proactive in making sure that we get, you know, to understand what we need to then increase our ability, and being open to feedback people have to us as well.
Those are some certainly great points and insights for people to keep in mind.
Jamie, can I weigh in just for a second? Because Michelle and Bernie, you both triggered a thought, or a couple of thoughts, and one is to embrace being uncomfortable. And until we can embrace being uncomfortable, which ties right into my second thought, which is be a curious learner. If you're curious and you're seeking to learn from others and you're a leader, then you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Those are two that just came to mind as a result of my colleagues' comments earlier.
So I would also like to weigh in. I spent 25 years at Anheuser-Busch. One of the roles in my 25 years there was the director of diversity. And it was simply a slogan in those days, and a program that was never intended to be successful. I have great faith in the future. I spent the last 10 years officing in Cortex, and I can tell you what's happening in that new world has great hope. And so, having been in both places now, in that old, stable place, and in that new, exciting, energized space, diversity, equity is alive and well in the future, not in the least.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great to hear.
Yeah, I like what Roni said. You know, one of the things that, you know, the obvious elephant in the room right now is everything that's going on around the country regarding Floyd Graham's his death, murder, however you want to put it. And when I live in Ferguson, Missouri, and so during the Mike Brown episode, I was right here and could see it. And there was diversity in a lot of the crowds there, although that wasn't shown in the media very much.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that was notably different this time is when I looked at the crowds from coast to coast, there was a lot of diversity. And it was one where the cameraman could not really angle the cameras in such a way to only show Black people. It was, and so I thought, there may be some hope for us as a nation and our young people. And
Right.
that, some of the thinking that is, prevailed in the country for so long, they're starting to strip that away a little bit. And so I thought, we may be okay. We may be okay, but it certainly will take some concerted effort and a commitment to really make a dent and not, placate people, or Roni, do like what you were saying, we have the slogan, we have it on the website, but that's all we do.
Right. Now is really a time more than ever where people need to see action. And it's not just paying lip service to whatever it is, whether it's talent attraction, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, the populace is really calling for action. So I like, the hope factor that you've all brought in there, because that's really what's going to help a lot of communities to rebuild during these challenging times. So my final question to all of you is, what is your best advice? And you can pick either one, to applicants or best advice to employers.
I'll lead off. I don't know that it's best advice, it's just my advice. And that is, there are a couple of phrases that come to mind as I think about the times we're going through. One is there's a guy, and I read the book years ago by Dr. Robert Schuller, and it's titled, "Tough Times Don't Last, Tough People Do." And so that's the mindset that says, stay the course, keep the faith. As a former rugby player, my head is a little bit stubborn sometimes. And so to me, success oftentimes is just getting up one more time than being knocked down. Things will be okay. Lean on others for support. Feel comfortable being vulnerable. And I had a bad day a few weeks ago, and our team couldn't believe it because I don't have bad days, but I woke up in a bad mood, and I told them, I'm in a bad mood. I'm going to give myself permission for 24 hours to be like this. So have mercy on yourself too.
Thank you for that, Mark. I think it's the authenticity that was mentioned earlier was important in candidates. It's also very important with leaders as well. So thank you for that.
So I'll weigh in. I think that's great advice, Mark, right? Just being vulnerable. And I think that goes on both sides. If you're a leader in an organization, it's okay to be vulnerable with your people, because unless you're authentic self, your people aren't going to trust you to lead. So I would encourage you to do that. If you're a candidate, my best advice is that finding a job or a position is a job. Just sending out a resume here or there, it may not net you what you want to do. So be intentional, create a plan for what you want to do and finding a position, the type of role you want, the type of company you want, and then be flexible. We're in unprecedented time. There's a lot of unemployment. So maybe you take a contingent contract job for a bit, right? It still keeps you in the marketplace. So be flexible about what you're willing to do and how you're willing to do it, but be intentional about how you get there.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'll follow up.
Go ahead, Ryan.
All great advice from Mark and Michelle. I've been on the participant side for a long time now, and my heart is there. So I would say to pause. I think that's really important. To assess, to be thoughtful about what you want and where you want to go, and you have to be strategic. This is about a strategy. I can't say that enough. And then authenticity, transparency, breathe, go for a walk, get connected with nature. Whatever you need to do to energize you right now is really critical to your long-term success.
Thank you, Roni.
I think Roni stole mine, so I will add something to it. Because I think, you know, it is really important to have a strategy. That's one of the things that I really try to preach in my coaching is, you know, you need to really identify the direction and the path that you want to take, because that really drives all of the decisions afterwards that need to be made. And so you really have to think about, what do I want? And I also think, and I'm like Roni, I'm more on the candidate side now with so much of my work. But I think that another two is, don't give up. You know, it is important that you get up that one more time than you fall down, as Mark said. And because giving up is definitely not going to get you to where you want to go. And it gets tough some days, it gets scary some days, but it's always possible. And people have to press through those tough days, allow themselves to have a tough day, and then get right back up and do something. And I think also trying to make yourself stand out in some unique ways in the job search, because there are 40 million people plus out here looking for jobs. And I think if you can do something unique, such as, you know, if you have a particular skill or expertise, why not offer some training, free training through Zoom, and then brand it, you know, put it out there so that potential recruiters are seeing what you're doing. If you know something well enough to teach it, that may be the person that they're interested in. Or start a podcast, start a blog about it, because that may be the one thing that differentiates you from your competition and gets you the phone call.
No truer words were spoken. I want to thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. Many thanks to Roni Chambers, VP Coaching and Excellence at Impact Group, Bernie Frazier, Founder and President at CareerCompass, Mark Grieman, Founder CEO, ROI Search Partners, and Michelle King, VP Talent Acquisition, Diversity and Inclusion, RGA. Thank you all very much. Great words of wisdom, and I look forward to seeing all of you in person very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. It's great to see you all again.
Yes.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.